Dude, that hits hard, dude.
So that comment right there is the whole reason I think Calvin is building one. When I took him for a ride in it at Grassroots, he was like, you know, how fun could it be? It's a 5,000 pound SUV.
Right?
And back then I was only making like 9 pounds of boost, and I got on it and he was like, he didn't tell me at the time, but I guess in his head he was like, okay, that's pretty fun. I actually do think he wound up telling me like he was surprised, but I didn't know until he told me he bought one that he was like, oh yeah, I don't know if I ever told you this, but like your Trailblazer surprised me so much that I decided like I'm gonna go ahead and build one.
There's no lag on that downshift. I mean, it's a tiny bit.
It is kind of wild. Oh.
It's, yeah.
All right. So I'm in 4-wheel drive, so
okay.
As long as nobody comes up behind me. I don't know how well it'll actually launch on the street, but we can try.
Dude, that's awesome. Dude, that 6L80 shifts like a beast.
Yeah, and that's all Jeremy. Like,
that's awesome.
He tuned it super well. Yeah, and that's 4-wheel drive. If I tried to do that in 2-wheel drive, we would just be roasting them, right? I'll go up and turn around with, at least do one more.
Sure. And then,
but like when you're just driving, it's just like a stock Trailblazer.
Oh, this
has an exhaust.
Yeah, totally. This thing is a riot.
Yeah, so this is the same engine tune, maybe a slight tweak in the trans tune that did like the 11.0 at the track. So
Okay.
on the, obviously on the track I can leave a lot harder, so it actually will like put you back a little bit, but yeah, it's you surprise a lot of people in this thing, that's for sure.
So I don't want to give away any of Jeremy's secrets if this is top secret stuff, but does he lock the converter like right after the shift? Because it doesn't feel like there's the shift and then the converter lock.
I don't know. I think it's set at a certain RPM, but
okay.
Yeah, we wind up locking the converter in 2nd gear. So
okay.
the early, I think he was telling me a lot of the things that he does for the CTSV and the G8 guys and stuff, and he was saying he's just had a lot of success locking it earlier because, naturally you're going to make more power. Right. So some people have commented and stuff and said like, oh, you got to be careful with it. I saw a couple people say you need to be careful with the converter being locked, shifting from 2nd to 3rd. That might be like a weak point, but I mean, I don't know.
I think it's the stock 6L80 converter is just not good, but you don't have that problem. Oh man.
All right, well, this is gonna be pretty enjoyable. I've been kind of throwing the idea around of having a podcast, but I don't know what I would really name it. I kind of told Eric here that I would probably name it not a podcast because I didn't want it to be like every other podcast. But that being said, I'm pretty excited about this video. Got to give Eric a ride in the 4200 Trailblazer, and Eric has been a huge supporter of the platform, being as he's been around and involved in the platform far longer than I have. Like, I'm kind of a newcomer, all things considered.
You're already faster than me.
Yeah. But I don't actually know how to say your last name. Was it Heinze or Heinz?
It's Heinze, Heinz, whatever.
Okay.
Depending on how German you are, I don't know.
Yeah, I always thought it was just like the ketchup.
Yeah, that's what I say to other people.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll say it like that. Eric Heinz, owner of Atlas Industries. Many of your parts obviously are on the Trailblazer, and honestly, without his help, the Trailblazer probably would have not made it to Sick Week. And because of his help, the Trailblazer stood out a lot in the pits because of that really nice shiny red valve cover. And that is just one of like many things that he offers as a company. But we got this super nice gold one here, and the GTO behind me, as you guys know, we've done some videos where we got a 4200 sitting in it now, kind of just loosely, just sitting on the K member. But the plans are for this thing to be built, and Eric here offered to help with that as well. So this BBS gold, or pretty dang close to it, valve cover will be going into the GTO, and I'm really excited. So do you want to tell them about the process that you use when that you go through? Because for those that don't know, like this oil filler cap is normally here, right? And he custom like shaves it and relocates it. He can do like pretty much whatever you want to do to an Atlas valve cover, he can do.
Sure. So the valve cover, and I haven't listed them on the website for an exact reason, is because I'm so busy that I've had enough valve cover sales just word of mouth. But obviously you've seen Calvin's video. Now this video I'm going to be listing on the website, but regardless, so I'm going to be listing them. They're going to vary again by options to $400 to $500. And a lot of people are going to go, well, that's crazy because I can get a powder coat job for $100. But the work involved in this is kind of a passion and an art for me. If you had someone do this, it would take a lot of time. So what I do is, obviously the factory valve cover is curved in the front and the oil cap is there. So I trim this down. Now the 4200 cam gears are really big, and one of the reasons GM did that was to help with timing chain wear, because there's more contact with the timing chain than things like the 3.6, which is a timing chain disaster. But the top of the valve cover I'm able to shave about 3/4 of an inch off, which doesn't seem like much, but especially on vehicles with a sloped hood, which is basically anything that's not a Trailblazer or maybe a 60s to 80s American car. Over front of the VVT actuator, I'm able to shave a lot of area, and then not having the valve cover up front, we can put an oil cap here, and I try to put big oil caps so you can take a big jug of oil and dump it in.
I'm
here.
honestly a huge fan of that, because it's nice. You don't always have a funnel, right? And it's kind of nice to be able to like just pour the jug in, and you have a lot bigger surface area to put it in there.
So there's that, and again, one of the points of this is it's kind of an art piece. So if it's on somebody's Trailblazer or any other swap vehicle, I want it to kind of stand out. I want it to make it look nice, and I want them to, it attract people to their vehicle. So I can do different options. I can move the oil cap here. I've had some here. I've had some here, wherever is convenient. In this case, Jonathan wanted a -10 AN fitting, so we put that here for a PCV, but I can really do a bunch of different options, whatever you need. So for powder coat, I can do chrome. It's pretty hard to polish this, because what I end up doing is, obviously when you weld a casting that's been in oil, it doesn't go well. So I actually end up using a combination of high temp JB weld and some other things to actually body work the whole valve cover. So I body work the valve cover after it's been filled with JB weld, sand everything down, sand all of this because there's other bosses here, sand everything flat, and then I powder coat it. So I've had people ask me if they want it just raw. That's totally an option to get it raw, but just realize that if you're going to polish it, it's not going to look nice because it's a factory valve cover, it's cast. That's just the way it's going to be. So.
For sure. And like, you mentioned the price, which I know is probably like a big point of contention for some people, but you guys got to remember, like, if you were to set this next, unfortunately I don't have another aluminum one, but if you were to set this next to a stock 4200 aluminum valve cover, it looks completely different. Not just because of the color and the oil cap relocation, but like all those bosses that are here, right, they're gone. And this should go without saying, but obviously this customization is only on the later cylinder head Atlas motors, because the first generation, the 0205s, are all plastic, so you're not powder coating. Well, I mean, I know there's ways around it. You could technically powder coat it, but you're not doing any of those major modifications to a plastic one, right? I mean,
Yeah, no, I appreciate bringing that up because I get asked that a lot. Unfortunately, the plastic valve covers not only is a different bolt pattern in the front, but it doesn't fit because the VVT actuator is bigger on the plastic valve cover. And the best at that point, if you just want to paint it, I've had people, say they painted theirs with Krylon or other things and it works good, but you can't powder coat it. So.
yeah, for sure. And like the red one came out great, and he had mentioned it. The reason I went to a 10 AN fitting here is because on the 4200 we had a 12 AN. Now that 4200 valve cover that's on the Trailblazer was actually one that he had previously done. So I didn't really select that. It just happened to be done. I wanted a red one anyway, and it looked great. So we just made it work. But the Motion Raceworks catch can that they sell comes with 10 AN fittings, so I had to reduce it down from a 12 to a 10. So with the 10 AN fitting, it's easy to just go straight to a 10 AN fitting. Now I mentioned it earlier, right? Like I'm just new to this 4200 platform, but Eric has been in it for a while. So like, how long have you been into the platform, and what got you into it? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so about back in 2015, going into 2016, I had a 87 Jeep Comanche, which I still have. That's just kind of my beater vehicle that I try everything out on. So
Okay.
it had the 2.5 Jeep 4-cylinder. Everyone's like, "Oh, 4-liter, swap it up." But I'm too weird. I can't do anything. I can't do anything normal. I thought about LS swapping it, but again, that's too normal. I just got to do something weird. So
And those things are pretty rare, right? Like in general, the Comanches.
yeah, they're pretty rare, and most of them are really rusted out,
Oh.
especially in where I'm at in Michigan. So I drove
true.
down to Virginia to get this one. So I ended up 42 swapping it because I actually came across at the time that was the big issue, was there was no flywheels. So I came across an actual prototype GM flywheel. They actually made some, but I engine swapped that. I had to make a custom oil pan at the time, and at the time the Facebook group that probably a lot of you are familiar with didn't exist, so there wasn't much information, and a friend helped me with HP tuners. I didn't know that at the time. So I got involved with that, but the job I worked at the time, Federal Mogul, in engine bearings, I got to be involved with GM parts and GM powertrain, and I got to meet some of the guys who worked on this engine. So that kind of piqued my interest in just seeing them, that they were cheap, and it was an inline six that was neat. It was American,
For
and it
sure.
was something different than 2JZ, which is obviously awesome. But it's cool to be different.
Yeah,
you know,
no,
so.
absolutely. Yeah, and I can't tell you how many people they walk by the Trailblazer at Sick Week, and I know we talked about it a little bit, but they're like, "Oh man, it's got a bear, it's got a 2J," because that's everybody's first response when they see an inline six. They don't
Yeah.
realize that, oh wow, there are other modern inline six cylinders out there.
Yeah.
And once people find out, like wait, I didn't even know they came with these, and they're like, yeah, they did for a long time. And there's probably millions of them out there across the country in junkyards right now, and people start to think like, oh, that's super cool. And one of the common themes that people would applaud me for, and I'm sure they say the same thing, Calvin, and they said the same thing to oh man, I forgot his name. Who was the guy there that had the Firebird? Super nice guy.
Oh man, I'm terrible with names.
Not-
I know exactly what you're talking
Not
about. Yeah.
Dustin or I met him and his wife, and I felt bad. They had a pretty rough go of it at Sick Week, but
Yeah, the Blue Firebird. Yeah. I'm
gorgeous
forgetting.
car, really
Yeah.
nice build. But they told him, and they would tell me, they're like, man, I really appreciate the originality, right? Like, and that's kind of nice to see that like the people doing these swaps aren't the only people seeing that, like, okay, like, oh, that's another LS swap, awesome, or like, that's another Coyote swap. It's starting to get like pretty redundant with how common these swaps are. Now, like some people will say, oh, like why try to do something that you don't know that works, right? Why, you can go with a proven platform, but this platform, and as you've seen with your Jeep swap, it's pretty rewarding when it's done, right? It's
Yeah.
like, it's different. You've done it. You've seen it's possible, and it's like, all right, cool. Like, we got something different. We're kind of going against the stream here, as
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But so we talked about the valve cover. The other thing that's sitting here that I wanted you to talk about, if you could, is the transmission adapter plate. So in a previous video, right, naturally we swapped the Trailblazer to a 6L80, And if you guys haven't seen that video, or if you don't already know, the Atlas 4200 does not share a bell housing pattern with anything, unfortunately. So,
because GM.
yeah, they that motor is just one off, and you can put an AR5 behind it using a 4L60 bell housing and just moving it to an AR5. But to run any modern or even non-modern, like a Turbo 400, but any small block Chevy transmission pattern, you need to run a transmission adapter plate. Now, the one we put on the Trailblazer was an MTech one, and I think I speak for Eric here when I say, like, this isn't like a direct competition to other companies, it's just in addition to, right? Like, there's not many people out there obviously offering these parts.
I like MTech, and I like Mark that works there.
Yeah,
so,
Mark is a great guy, super nice, and this, it's different. It's a different style. You have different options, and I actually really like this. So I kind of wanted you to talk about like what you made, how yours is different from MTech, and your thought process behind it.
Sure. Yeah. So again, because I'm a nerd engineer and fabricator at heart, so I like minimalist things, and I like engineering things to work well and be good. So one of the things I went with was 7075 T6 aluminum, which I know is hard to believe, and even as going to engineering school and working in the field for a long time as you have, it's really hard to believe that aluminum can be stronger than mild steel, but 7075 is. That's what they've used in aircraft manufacturing for a long time. It's not the exact same material, but what Ford went to with their F-Series bodies and everything. So it's extremely strong. And what it allows you to do is this millimeter, it's only 10 millimeters thick. So it allows to be a thin plate, but I don't have to do inserts. Actually, originally the prototype, I made inserts, and I realized they're totally unnecessary. So these bolts from the factory only tightened to 40 foot-pounds. I've tightened them to well over 100 in multiple tests just to be sure. But the adapter plate, this one has, Chevy, so small block Chevy, big block Chevy, LS, which is a little bit different but adapts, BOP, and sometimes Cadillac, technically Duramax, if I bet nobody in the planet will ever put an Allison behind this, but it's technically possible. And then also BOP, because maybe somebody's got a muscle car and maybe they want to do an old Turbo 400 and they had it in a Cutlass or a GTO or something. So,
and honestly, sometimes when I've been looking for Turbo 400s for like grassroots stuff, you can't find a Chevy one for cheap, but BOP ones are always cheaper because the crowd of people that buy them are so much smaller.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, that's one option you have with this. But the one thing I wanted to really do, and it's kind of my ethos with the whole company, is I don't want parts to cost $1 million because it's not a 2JZ. It'll never be a 2JZ, and I don't want it to be a 2JZ. I want it to be prices that I can buy, and I want it to be easy too. So the adapter comes obviously as the adapter. It's going to come with the bolt kit with extended dowels, which you're going to need because that's the only thing that the Atlas shares with the LS platform, and technically small block Chevy, big block Chevy, is the dowel pin locations. So the 2 dowel pin locations and the bolts that go through them. So there's extended dowels that go there. So that is what makes this easy to bolt up, is the bolt pattern. The transmission is relying on the dowels to stay aligned. So the bolt pattern is secondary to that. But yeah, I guess I try to make a nice piece that's easy to bolt on and also lightweight. So the MTech one is good to go too if you want something as a motor mount plate. This was not designed as that. This is 7075, so you can't weld it to it. But if you're going to do a T56 or Turbo 400, 4L80, any other GM transmission, you can use this to bolt it up.
Yeah, and we have the MTech one and probably one of the earlier edition MTech adapter plates in the Trailblazer, and the sides of it are much wider. And I was showing Eric, like, we actually had to cut off about an inch on either side to get it to fit in the trans tunnel of the Trailblazer. So this one is noticeably much thinner, and I kind of want to bring up to a good point. So like, a lot of people will have that initial knee-jerk reaction to complain like, well, I am threading in like a grade 10 stainless bolt into this and it's aluminum, but you're doing that already from the factory. I want to remind people
that's a great point. It's going into an aluminum block.
It's going into an aluminum
Yeah.
block. Now I think the aluminum block is like 6061, but I think it's still T6 hardness.
Yeah, it's something around there. Calvin did that big video on
Yeah,
block
so
hardness,
like
yeah.
it's a moot point. Like you're already tightening a bell housing into an aluminum block. Now, sure, like thread engagement, you're probably threading it into like a beefier area, but at the end of the day, the threads themselves are no different than this. So you're threading a steel bolt into an aluminum surface. So, and like Eric said, like he's done torque tests, and from an engineering standpoint, there's really no difference. In fact, the reason I like this maybe a little bit better than Mark's, and I don't want to say that with like I don't like Mark's. I like Mark's. I'd use Mark's again in a heartbeat. But being an aluminum adapter plate, and then you're going to have an aluminum block on one side and aluminum bell housing on the other, from a thermal expansion standpoint, everything is going to grow together at the same rate. I don't think that is really an issue at all with the stainless plate.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know that everything could grow and contract at the same rate, being all the same material.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like that. And I vividly remember picking up Mark's, and it's probably about the same thickness. It's like 3/8 inch.
I think, yeah.
And this is noticeably lighter. So like if you're looking to save like every ounce of weight you can, this would be the way to go. Like this would have been great on the Trailblazer, because obviously the Trailblazer is already like 5,000 pounds race weight. So you try to save weight anywhere you can.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice, for people like wanting to build a race car. This is a really, really good option. And some of the other parts that I've got from you too that I wanted to mention is like you sell the stud kits for the exhaust and the intake manifold, which are actually on this motor behind us.
Yeah.
And little things like that I think are like highly overlooked when like building a motor. Like, say you get a motor from the junkyard, you don't want to use the stock intake manifold. And I don't know, I can't remember if the stock intake manifold bolts are captured. Sometimes you unbolt them and they stay with the
They
flange.
are, yes.
Yeah, so then like you're already looking for new bolts, and you offer that kit, and I don't know, I think they're grade 10, right? But it's
it's a stainless grade, so it's somewhere
grade
in
8,
between.
grade 10.
Yeah.
They're torqued to something super small in comparison
Yeah.
to everything else. But yeah, anyway, he offers those stud kits, so like you get like a M8 or an M10 stud, thread them into the head, Loctite them, and then you can slide on your intake manifold or your exhaust manifold. And then besides that, do you have plans for any other parts that you're coming out with, like in the near future?
I have quite a few plans. So, and I'll mention those stud kits. If you notice, there's no raise in price because they're not Chinese. So there's no increase because of tariffs on those. So
Nice.
I'm proud of not offering Chinese bolts, but yeah. So I know you guys have already seen the fuel rails on
That's
your
right.
setup.
I
So
didn't even get a chance to talk about that.
yeah. So one of the big things that the 4200 world is really missing, and I've made them for quite some time, is the extended 5-cylinder oil pans. But
Yep.
honestly, that's a means to an end, because welding cast aluminum pans, even though I get brand new ones, it's not great. So I'm working on coming out with rear sump pans. It's been slower than I want. I'm coming out with flywheels again. It's been slower than I want. But as a small business, everything, it takes a while. So obviously getting there. But one of the other big things I plan on coming out with, which I kind of failed you with, is the two-step box.
Oh yeah, honestly, it was fine
Yeah.
without it, but now it will be really cool when it's done.
Yep. So I'm working on a two-step box that it's kind of like the N2MB Motorsports one that's been out forever and works good, but it's going to have dials on it. It's a box about this big, and it's going to have dials on it so that you can adjust both the RPM that you want the two-step at and also the harshness. So I'm not going to make engine sounds, even though I love making those when the camera's off. But you can adjust it from a typical LS to a two-step, whatever you want. You're going to be able to adjust that harshness on. So
Nice.
I was trying to get it done for his Sick Week debut, and I ended up hooking up backwards, and I ended up frying the board because that's how it goes. So I'm still working on that, but I plan on coming out with that. And one cool feature of that is it's going to allow the retarding of ignition timing by actually modifying the intake air temperature signal. So the point being is that you can already do that with an aftermarket engine management system, but this is going to be able to do that on a factory ECU.
Yeah.
So it's not perfect, but if you're using a factory ECU, especially something like a Trailblazer where you don't want to replace the body control module and go through all this stuff, it's going to be kind of a neat
Yeah, that's
thing.
what I was kind of going to ask. So, like, is the intention for that only for stock ECU applications?
No, it's going to be for aftermarket, but
Okay.
that's not a huge target just because a lot of the aftermarket stuff already comes with built-in
For sure.
two-steps, so I wasn't focusing on that as much.
Yeah, I will say like a huge benefit though, because like I've had in 2B watt boxes, and you have to go into your laptop and change
Yeah, it's just by serial cable. Yeah.
And granted, it doesn't take very long, but like if you're like running a true shoot event where you have to make back-to-back passes and you don't have the time to like open your laptop and like get everything together and make that change. It takes seconds to just turn a knob,
Yeah.
and you're done. Like, I think that is a huge step in the right direction. And I'm really glad that you went down that path, because I don't even know if I showed you, but sitting over on my workbench, I have a solid state relay board, and I have a generic shift light, and I was gonna make my own potentiometer
Oh, nice. No, I didn't
using that. I was gonna make my own board,
Uh-huh.
but yours looks so much nicer, and I was like, you know what? I'm not even gonna bother with this. And the wiring was gonna be a mess, I'm sure. But no, I think that's a really cool part. And you touched on something too that I completely forgot to bring up, which is the fuel rail. And I think that's a huge win, because you can put probably a dash 12 if you wanted to.
Yep, I'm building one right now. As soon as I get back from being in Florida here, I'm going to be finishing it, but it's going to be a dash 12.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't remember the size. Was it half-inch MPT?
Half-inch NPT.
Yeah. So a half-inch MPT is going into this rail that he makes, and if you look at the inside diameter of like a 10 AN fitting, it's pretty large. So like, for example, new GT500s, and I don't even know if you do this, but like new GT500s, like 2020 and up, on the factory fuel system, they're making about 1,000 horsepower, and it's all through like a 3/8 inch line.
Oh, I know. Yeah, 3/8 is dash 6 basically.
Exactly. So like, I think that the initial thought process of like the restrictions of specific diameters is kind of like, maybe people were like heavily underestimating like the capabilities of like the floor that was possible. But with your rail, there's no restriction. Like that thing can make like 1,500 horsepower. It's wild. And it worked great. We had a fuel leak. I know you know this. Everyone here may not know, and I don't remember if I shared this on any of my Sick Week videos, but the very first issue we had with Sick Week, other than like we had a squealing belt for a little bit, which we resolved thanks to Calvin. But we had a fuel leak, which we actually didn't know about. Like, we drove the Trailblazer from here in Florida all the way to Georgia, and when we were in the parking lot of the hotel, I was just looking everything over, and I saw like a drip at the fitting in the back by the firewall. I'm like, oh my gosh. And it wasn't the rail by any means. It was me. I didn't tighten down the fitting going into that rail. But yeah, I know Eric said he was sweating like.
Yeah, he's messaging me like, "There's a leak at the rail. You leak checked it, right?" I'm like,
yeah,
someone else, leak checked.
It was a comment that my co-pilot made, like, just because we're all engineers, and he was like, he did pressure test this, right? I was like, yeah, I'm like 95% sure he said that. So I was like, well, let me just ask him real quick, which I didn't mean to induce any anxiety.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, that fuel rail is great. It installs super easy. What I really like about it, Calvin touched on it in his video today, is it has the safety features for the clips. And what's funny is like with the Snake Eater injectors that I have their older versions, but you have to run it at the very top clip of their injector. So like the O-ring is like just in there, and that's it. And I was even nervous, like even using your clips. I'm like, man, is this thing gonna leak? And it doesn't.
Nice.
And it's nice once it's clipped in there, it cannot move anywhere.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
I hear my daughter crying in the distance. So I'm kind of wondering what's going on, but yeah, man, it's great to have you down here. I'm glad you.
Yeah, I'm glad I was able to stop by.
So what thoughts on the Trailblazer going for a ride?
No, it was awesome. I mean, I knew it was going to be quick just based on seeing your videos, but the thing absolutely rips. I mean, if I build an automatic, when I build an automatic 4200 next, it's got to have a 6 LED with the Trailblazer Motorsport setup.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the icing on the cake.
For sure, yeah. Shout out Trailblazer Motorsports again. Can't say enough good things. They make that swap possible. The only thing is, like, people may not want the 6 LED anymore once Calvin gets done with his 8 HP.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really, really, really looking forward to seeing how that thing does.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that thing's already been torture tested in yacht-sized vehicles with the Chargers and the Challengers, so it's going in something that's equally as heavy.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's going to wrap up this video. Again, this is like a beta test podcast, not a podcast. But really, really happy to have Eric here. If you guys are considering one of these Atlas swaps or building a Trailblazer, I highly, highly recommend going to Atlas Industries' website. Of course, everything that we talked about is on their website. Their website will be linked in the description below. Can't say enough good things about him. Great customer support, American company. He does great things. And then more stuff on the horizon too. Stuff that you guys haven't talked about. Stuff that's actually pretty exciting. So things that the platform really needs, and will make the swaps easier and whatever you decide to put it in. So that's gonna wrap up this video, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Hey.